Okay, Algebra 1, let's do it. Here we go, first video of the season. These early videos are going to be a review in some manner of some of the equation solving and the stuff that we did in 7th grade. Although some of the ideas I think you'll find a little bit more sophisticated than we actually did in the pre-algebra class. So you have your notes in front of you, and we're going to go right into to 2A, solving basic equations, remembering that the goal of solving any equation is to get the variable by itself, to isolate the variable. In order to do this, we're going to use the idea of inverse operations. Let me see if I can get a little skinnier pen going here. Inverse operations. So we are going to undo the operation that's been done by using the inverse of the operation. And of course, addition and subtraction go together. Those are inverses of each other, and multiplication and division. Aren't you glad there's just 4 operations? Also, we need to think about square roots and squares. Those are inverses of each other. And to undo a fraction, you multiply by the reciprocal of the fraction that's the coefficient in front of the variable. And we'll have an example of all of these coming up here pretty quickly. So here we go. Those of you that were with me last year, you know I don't like to write on the original equation, but we don't have a whole lot of room on these pieces of paper, so I'm going to go ahead and just use the original equation as it's written for my practice, and I'm not going to rewrite the equation. So obviously A is not alone. He's got a 6 attached by him by subtraction. We're going to use the inverse operation, which is addition. So big review, you're going to add 6 to both sides, and you end up with A isolated. He's by himself now, and your answer is -4. So that's using the inverse of subtraction. Moving over to B, we see that the Y is not alone. He has a 5 attached by division. We're going to use the inverse operation, which is multiplication. So we're going to multiply both sides by 5 and end up with Y equals 50. Some of you might be asking, well, you always made me show my check. Where are the checks in all this? Again, we're short on space and we're short on time. You guys know that checking, you guys know that checking these. Okay, let's move on. The square root of x equals 8. So we're looking to get x alone. He's not alone. He may look like he's alone, but he's not, because the square root of x is not the same thing as x. So to undo a square root operation, you square both sides. So we're going to square the square root of x, and we're going to square 8, kind of off center there. The square root of x times himself, the square root of x, actually gives you x, and 8 squared is 64. One more of these. This is one that has a coefficient that's a fraction. In order to get rid of the fractional coefficient, we are going to multiply both sides by the reciprocal of the fraction. That will cancel it out and make it 1, which leaves the x alone. So we're going to multiply both sides by 5 over 3. So those cancel. That's 15 over 15, which is 1. So we have x equals, there's 2 ways to do this. You can think of this as 6 over 1, and you can multiply straight across, top and bottom, and then divide, but I don't want to do that much work if I don't have to. 3 goes into 6 twice, and 2 times 5 is 10. So there are 4 examples that go through the 4 steps up here. This is a review, I know. We're going to move on and talk about 2-step equations where you have 2 different operations to undo. When you have more than one thing you have to do, you've got to have an order to go by. So the order of operations is actually backwards when you are solving equations. So you're going to do your adding and subtracting first. You're going to do your multiplying and dividing. So this is add, subtract. This is multiply, divide. That comes second. And then your exponents. And then finally your parentheses or your grouping symbols kind of are at the tail end. So let me go to the next page here, and we're going to go through a couple of these pretty quickly as well. So in looking at example number A, you've got two things that are attached to the variable, the 3 by multiplication and another 3 by addition. The first thing we're going to do is subtract 3 from both sides, ending up with 3m equals 12. And now you do your division, divide both sides by 3, and m equals 4. Again, I know you guys know how to do this. I just wanted to run through a couple of these to get your mind back in the game here. This one is an interesting one, 2b. It can be done a couple of different ways. You can do your distribution first and get 3c plus 9 equals 15, and then subtract 9 from both sides. All good. 3c equals 15 minus 9 is what? 6. Divide by 3, and you get c is equal to 2. But easier, I think, is to look at the equation like this and say, I want to divide both sides by 3 and get rid of that guy. And that's legal. You can do that because you've got two factors multiplied together, 3 and c plus 3, and you can cancel out one of them on both sides. That leaves you with c plus 3 equals 5. Subtract 3, and you get the same answer, of course, c equals 2. So it's up to you how you want to do it, but I think if you start looking at it in this method, you will find that your equations become a little bit quicker to solve doing it that way. Let's look at number C. This one, you're going to take care of the x minus 2 is actually one term. So you look at this as a fraction, actually x minus 2 over 5. We're going to do the multiplication first to cancel out the 5's, and then you end up with x minus 2 equals 20. Of course, add 2, and you end up with your variable isolated at 22. One more over here. We're going to divide both sides by 2. We're going to leave the exponent for after the division, and we end up with y squared is equal to 4. Now we need to undo a square, which you do by taking the square root of both sides, and you end up with y is equal to plus or minus 2. This might be a little bit different than we did in 7th grade. I'm not even sure we talked about this potential of having two answers for an equation. But if you think about it, y squared equals 4. You can have negative 2 times negative 2 equaling 4, or positive 2 times positive 2 equaling 4. So when you have a squared in your equation, oftentimes you're going to end up with two answers as your solution. Okie dokie, let's talk about, I'll tell you what, I'll go ahead and end this video now, and then I'll start the next video. You guys can take a little bit of a break and come back, and then we'll talk about simplifying both sides of an equation if you've got variables on both sides. Thanks for watching.